Amid the hourly struggles to button up Vulture Mountain karak, a messenger from Eye of the Panther arrived. Once Storri read his missive, he ordered his troops to prepare for a sally, very much contrary to the plan. They had been working with the miners to widen the cavern leading from the top-level defensive maze to the giant assembly chamber below. Such a thing would only hasten a chaos intrusion if the defenses were broken, as all present constantly mumbled. However, the mysterious plan called for it all the same. While the soldiers geared up, Storri hurried down one level further to the Engineers Guild. The doors were locked. Kazran answered Storri's banging by coming outside, quickly closing the door behind him. "Sorry, getting a bit crowded in there," he said. "What?" "Necromancy. Keep your hands clean, Thane. You're all we have left." "Is it working?" "I have no idea." "Is it nearly done?" "Doubt it. Are they here?" "No. I'm heading to Eye of the Panther, though. Redmane's having trouble with the corrupted Umgi. Not just the Umgi anymore, I think. The Elgi magic fades ever more. I'll have the Umgi here stowed further below." "In the Skaven tunnels?" "That's what's down there. Redmane has a plan to take advantage of the corruption if his clans become Jar. It might buy you more time, so I'll head out to do my part." "Thanks. Expecting to come back, are we?" "Expectations too dangerous. We'll see." "Right. Well, goodbye then." "Goodbye, Kazran." You'll be back, I know it." "And you'll... I dare not speculate." "Good call. I'll keep it up then, whatever I'm doing." With a handshake, Storri was off. Procuring land crawlers, motorcarts and gyrocopters for a quick journey, he zipped about halfway to Eye of the Panther until he was met by another messenger in the underway. The Chaos Army was already blockading the exits further along, and had the karak under siege. Storri and company had to double back and emerge onto the desert roads. It was dusk, mercifully dull and cool. Shadows moved beside the roads, beastman outcasts, far too timid to intervene, now roaming feral like the animals they partially were. The main hosts of the enemy could not be far off. Indeed, the surface village at Eye of the Panther was alight with torches and fires. "We must be done before morning for maximum effect. Let's to work," Storri said to his troops, who began to creep off the roads into the darkness. Below ground, Redmane rolled his shoulders and flexed his back. "All right, open the doors!" he bellowed. Runes flashed, and the two Gromril doors at the karak's surface slid open. The Chaos troops were standing right there, just pondering how to get in. Praising their gods, horns sounded, and the camp was summoned into an attack. They advanced into a carefully carved out hall, lined with statues and etched runes telling of ages past, of the Karak Angkor and Atalan's lost golden age. Its furnishings had all been removed. High above was a gallery flanking the hall, although its lights were all extinguished, so this was hardly visible. Only runelight shone at the far wall, revealing another door. The warriors charged across the hall, frantically looking about for something to kill. They came to the far door and shook it, achieving little. There was something of a crush as warriors behind pushed to get in, filling the room so completely that those inside could hardly move. Word eventually spread that it was all just another door, and that the will of the gods was truly difficult to interpret. It must have been especially perplexing when the exterior door suddenly slammed closed, obliterating warriors on the threshold. Then the lights in the hall buzzed to life, and the gallery above was clearly lined with bearded figures. "Goggles on! Let's give it a go!" Redmane called. Then a volley of pots was thrown down into the hall. They smashed with green flashes, spreading burning warp fire on the carpet of Chaos troops below. Still, it was nothing like the all-consuming inferno the Expeditionary Legion had seen in Gulf Chaos armies before. Some warriors even managed to shake it off. A dragon ogre laughed, and the warriors mockingly joined in. It's hardly unholy enough. Bring some of those Umgi heretics up, will you?" Redmane asked a soldier. "We'll need all we can for later, Lord," the soldier said. Well, we're now, not later, so let's just get along and do what I say, eh?" "Yes, my lord." Some humans were dug up from the karak depths and brought to the standoff. Now there were ringing booms filling the hall. Kholek was right outside, slamming his great hammer against stubborn Gromril. "You've all been praying, haven't you?" Redmane asked the human. She nodded timidly. "And what does the rat tell you?" "It tells us... I think it wants more." "More power?" "Yes, more power, please." "Ah, then we're alike. More power, please." "A little corruption goes a long way. I wonder if that asinine Thane got my message in the end. I suppose we'll see. No use beating around the barrel then, is there? Come here." Redmane beckoned the woman closer. She obeyed, then was suddenly tied up with ropes. She protested as warp fire bombs were fixed to her body. The Dawi had no question for Redmane's orders. Once ready, the woman was heaved up and thrown over the side of the gallery. She fell shrieking into the throng of chaos, then erupted in an explosive flame that covered most of the room, burning bright, hot, and inescapable. "Yes!" Redmane cheered. "So that's the way of it. I thought as much. Oh, the smell is quite strong. Enjoy it, lads!" A few more bombs, empowered by sacrifices, completed the coverage of the hall. For several minutes the flames burned down, consuming the 2,000 troops entirely. In the end, all that remained was smoke and a warm sludge staining the stonework. "I thought we might stay here longer, but I'm really ready for part 2. Are you ready for part 2, lads?" Redmane called. The Dawi hollered their approval, and they all rushed away into passages leading deeper into the karak. Shortly, Kholek's exhausted pounding on the door seemed to get results. The slabs were pulled aside by ancient forces, revealing the now empty hall. Once the smoke scurried out, warriors investigated the remains of their brothers. They quickly reported back to Kholek that all had perished, yet on a positive note, the door at the far end of the hall was now open. Quite clearly a trap. Even a dragon ogre could tell that. However, a dragon ogre suffering from a chronic pain in the neck didn't see the world so clearly. Kholek bid some of the beasts go in and investigate. Harpies flew up to search the gallery, finding its passages closed off. Various Satyrite runners disappeared through the open doors, then eventually returned. The dwarven city was there, labyrinthine and boarded up, but no sign of any dwarves. Yes, that it was a trap was so abundantly clear that the gods themselves should have been shouting into Kholek's ears to try something else. However, they were curiously silent. Kholek roared and commanded his army to scour the karak and purge all life, just what Redmane had been praying for. Storri watched the glow of chaos weapons drain through the karak doors. Kholek and his ogres went inside too. Tens of thousands of troops disappeared. Then the movement halted. There were faint clicks, audible with one's ear to the ground, echoing from far away. "It's time. Close in," Storri ordered. Soldiers nearby wedged a tall warp-fire torch pole into the ground, and at once it lit up a sickly green. Identical lights appeared in a ring around the village, marking out a circle. The Chaos troops looked about anxiously. Then came an explosion so bold that it deafened any not plugging their ears in anticipation, any but the dwarves. It was but a single dark powder rocket, its power enhanced to the point of apocalyptic destruction. The pressure wave of the blast knocked half the village down in an instant, had a similar effect on the floundering Chaos troops. Those that weren't pulverized pulled themselves up, only to be met with a ring of charging Dawi enclosing them. They seemed to be coming from all over, just like the light of the warp fire. The land crawlers pounded the meager fortifications left standing, while the gyrocopters rose from the dark valley and began spreading trails of fire from their clatterguns, carefully corralling the Chaos troops closer and closer to the karak doors. Already some were rushing inside to escape the various bombardments. Storri led the troops in slaying stragglers and generally making enough of a racket in the dark to push the whole army rearguard through those open doors. Spawn and beasts had to be slain, but wiser infantry were happy to concede the worthless village and return in strength once Kholek was alerted. Storri knew he had little time and ducked his way around the dim melees to reach the doors as soon as he could. He saw Kholek squeezing his way through the doors at the end of the first hall. Wasting no time, Storri brandished a glowing rectangular runestone, pointing it towards the doors. After a stomach-turning delay, the doors rapidly slammed closed right in front of a fuming Kholek. This time he was banging on them to get out. With the close support of the heavy vehicles, the Chaos stragglers were obliterated. Any other dark beings on the peripheries fled to the mountains. "That's it," Storri said. "Now we'll break into the underway nexus and assess the situation. If Redmane's true to his wild word, we'll just need to make sure the door's sealed and then be on our way." "Is there any hope for the karak, my Thane?" a legionary asked. "Yes, plenty. Simply not for those living in it, I fear. But what else should the world give us? If we live, we shall remake our cities anew. That is hope. Now, move at speed." The expedition reformed and chugged south, aiming to break the Chaos blockade of a major surface port to the underway, which might then allow them to reach the deep tunnels serving the bottom of the Eye of the Panther. Their fight would be easy enough. The dear and bloody action was reserved for the karak interior. There, the maze of halls and stairways was crowded with perplexed Chaos troops. The karak had been rebuilt and remodeled many times over the millennia, which resulted in a dense and confusing layout, ideal for constant tripwire bombs, firing whole ambushes, and vigorous choke point melees. The Chaos army was divided and subdivided at each junction, and whittled down by unreachable foes, scurrying through blocked-off passages to the flanks above and below. Still, the march of Chaos continued. Thick doors were forced open by labouring trolls. Mages summoned burning winds to course through firing ports and reveal hidden routes. And with Kholek crawling through the tunnels to return to the front of the effort, there was no considering any halt or change in strategy. The Dwarven guerrilla action could only last so long, as more and more of the karak fell. In the depths, Redmane had established his base of operations in the old noble district, brightly lit and overflowing with the possessions cleared away from the levels above. One more thing overflowed, less visible but equally noticeable: the magic of chaos. In the storage vaults below, the population remained in blind captivity, not allowed to evacuate, nor even know the cause of the violent shakes rolling down from high above. Any in their right mind would have been able to guess what was happening, however, none were in such a state. They had desperately coiled themselves to the power of the great horned rat, the being lighting the warp fire lamps they were made to huddle around. What hope they felt when their devotion swelled the flame and banished the cold for a short time. They were Redmane's secret weapon, though their knitting of the Chaos realm to their own was tainting the whole karak, making even the Dawi thirst for sacrifice. Thus it was with a bloodthirsty mood that the remaining warriors gathered around Redmane at the base of the great stairway to the upper levels. He ascended a few, then turned to speak. "The sealing is complete. We're locked in here with them. They're locked in here with us. And we have all the guns. So, let's go out with a bang and a burn, and maybe a few musical screams from those half-flayed butchers stinking up our halls. The ringers have their hourglasses, and they'll not hesitate. When the great bell sounds, it's all over. No ifs, ands, or buts. At the third ring, say your prayers. We'll head on through to the Chaos realm to keep fighting them there." A sorrowful end? Not at all. A glorious beginning. So, what are you waiting for? It's the end of the world, and we're going to take anything in Axe's reach with us. With a cry, the dwarves flew up the stairs into the war zone. There were no particular commands given, and the upper levels were a banquet of battles, small and large, all over the city, to be sampled with deadly delight. Some Dawi removed pieces of their armor and threw aside shields to take up a second axe. Enslaved by the currents of battle, berserk warriors descended from lines on the ceilings of prepared chambers, crashing into Chaos troops and then setting upon them without care for a safe exit. Tinkerers eagerly built dark powder grenades, so powerful that they couldn't be thrown far away enough to spare the grenadier from the blast. Entire banks of houses were brought down, collapsing stone above onto Chaos and Dwarf alike. Chaos troops halted in shock, hearing the cackling, unfamiliar laughter of slaughter-drunk Dawi. At one point in this labyrinthine battle, Redmane came to inspect an iron door his men were preparing to open. "What's in there?" the Lord asked. "All to the 13th guardhouse, packed with them, my lord," a soldier answered. Redmane eyed everyone's weapons. "It's not really that interesting, is it? Do we have the warp fire stuff anywhere?" he asked. "One of them engineers here somewhere. Oi!" A dwarf with a tank on his back sidled up. "Sorry, my lord. It's just not been working right. Only a little burn," he reported. "Easy to solve. Give it here, and you. I've got an urgent errand for you," Redmane said. Shortly, Redmane was standing before the door with a warp fire pump gripped with bare hands. He was struggling to stand up straight. The weight of the tank on his back was one thing, but the pull of the umgi tied in a chain behind him was really a pain to deal with. To solve that problem, and others, Redmane waved for the final part of his orders to be carried out. His soldiers pushed the umgi together, then drove a chaos spear through all 4 of them at once. Redmane felt the liquid in the tank bubbling. "Yes, turning our enemies against each other, eh?" he grinned. 2 warriors unbarred the door, then Redmane burst through and squeezed the handle on the pump. A jet of searing warp fire engulfed a hallway filled with idling Chaos warriors. Seeing the action, more began to charge from further back, but the trouble of avoiding the flaming, burning bodies of those killed first slowed them all down, rendering them next to be immolated. The umgi were struggling to do something about the spear through all of their stomachs, and the more they did, the brighter the flames burned. And indeed, the brighter the lights in the eyes of the watching dwarfs seemed to burn as well. It wasn't long before more of the precious umgi were loaded into chain gangs and marched off to opportune locations for fiery death traps, bringing uproarious laughter for the Dawi that could be heard across the realms. Entire routes were completely clogged with melted metal and flesh, sometimes even trapping the dwarves who had brought this about. Only dragon ogres could bear the burn, or indeed they could smash open new routes through the karak to avoid the fire traps altogether. Kholek gradually descended through the mad omnidirectional fighting, room by room, uncaring for the gushing of his troops from the mortal realm. The general course of the battle was in Kholek's favour. This was soon to prove a boon to the Dawi, for had the fighting lasted longer, they might have been tempted to skewer all of their precious rat worshippers to summon more awesome flames. That would have squandered the final part of Redmane's plan. Redmane was among the few survivors who managed to retreat to the noble chambers below the crumbling city levels. There he was summoned to the narrow underway passage bending off towards the underway proper, now several levels up. He attended and looked through the observation window above the sealed rune door. He saw Thane Storri Truai, backed by legionaries and several landcrawlers. "Your mission was a success, I take it?" Redmane asked. "Indeed, although we were hardly needed," Storri replied. "They were eager enough to run inside. And you got what you wanted?" "Of course, it's been tremendous fun. I saw all this coming and feared it. Alas, this corruption really sets it all in perspective. It's like being a newborn beardling again." "Right. So what's the situation?" "Regarding what?" "Regarding... We can rescue you now, so should we?" "Oh no. You should see what it's like in here. Far worse than before. Far worse. Besides, I don't want to go with you. The Chaos Gods have made me a better offer, and I speak for us all." "Very civil about it, aren't you?" "Always was, Thane. No reason to change now. So I think either you should come in here and join in, or make yourself scarce before my fancy for a crack at your fighting machines gets the better of me. and we're brawling in that underway like common jar. You'll finish your plan then? Yes. Get yourself clear, and don't worry about any chaos trouble from these parts. We'll see you in the other realm, assuming you get there eventually. Never thought I'd be heading here, but here I am, waving you goodbye. Give that sneaky king of ours my darkest regards." With this, Redmane closed the stone slats to block the windows and returned to what was left of his karak. Outside, Storri could hear the whispering voices of chaos growing noticeably louder, and quickly had his troops flee before they ended up in a similar state of mind to the jolly karak lord. As he journeyed back to Vulture Mountain, Redmane made his way to the pitch-dark caves the Umgi were held in. They all got up, begging to be taken next. They knew not where their folk were being escorted off to, but knew only that they wished to be somewhere else. They were in luck. Redmane was calling all of them up to the ornate square in the middle of the noble district. Here they were made to stand in a clump within the basin of a dried-up fountain. "All right then, everyone. The rats answered your prayers. Look at this," Redmane announced. On his order, the ventilation pipes above them started pouring warp fire liquid, stinking and runny. The Umgi tried to disperse to catch it in a fit of delight, but soldiers forced them back into the fountain. Then, to their glee, the fountain itself began to spurt the holy concoction, pooling over them up to their knees. They began to praise the great rat uncontrollably, feeling its close presence as they smeared themselves and each other. The driving rain from above was starting to get to the Dawi too. Warriors meant to be guarding the fountain's edge started to slip over and slosh about in the glorious green goop. Redmane egged them on. Laughter and cheering began to arise, covering the sound of roaring beasts and stomping greaves descending the great stair. "Okay, we're here. Now, the easy part at least," Redmane said. He picked up a sack and pushed to the middle of the fountain. His warriors dropped unlit candles into the deepening fluid, which bobbed on the surface. Redmane opened his sack and held 2 bundles of dark powder over his head. "Ah yes, I remember what this was all about. Kill the foe, kill the rat. But I repeat myself." He laughed. The Umgi scowled at him and were about to get violent upon hearing the sacrilegious suggestion. It was too late. Redmane closed his eyes and pressed the blasting caps on his dark powder bombs. The force of the flame that grew in that moment found every fractal corner of Eye of the Panther and fed on every living thing within. Dawi and Umgi of all persuasions were taken first, then beasts and spawn. Then the dragon ogres felt their weapons disintegrate and their armor melt into their flesh. They felt their eyes burst and their bones expand. They felt, in short, the protection of the Chaos Gods be overwhelmed by their delight at the offering the moment provided, and indeed the blow to their resurgent cousin, the rat. Kholek, standing on the great stair and just able to see the fountain at the other end of the cavern, was almost able to withstand the heat. His hide might have been able to survive being fused with molten metal. His eyes were vestigial, no less useless aflame than intact, and his bones had been shattered and remade countless times, what was once more. However, there in the ring of flame around his neck was an immovable lance draped with the banner of Lyonesse, lodged deep. The banner invited the warp fire through the magical wound. It was quick. Kholek's innards burned within a second. The gas and heat brought about a rapid detonation. The binding magic was withdrawn, with even the gods feeling the pain of the realm-crossing burn. Such was the quick demise of Kholek, his army, the better part of the corrupted cultists, and indeed the Dawi the gods were on the verge of puppeteering. The flame ultimately had only one place to go, a prepared chimney of stone that rose through the whole karak and towered above the surface entrance. From it shot a pillar of green flame, petering out and flickering somewhere above the thick clouds. It would burn until the fuel reserves of the karak were spent, projecting a green stripe in the sky that was clearly visible from Vulture Mountain by the time Storri had made it back. a symbol of both victory and defeat. A great blow had been dealt to both mortals and chaos alike, and together they were turned to vapour that pushed away the ashen clouds, revealing not a sky of blue, but of blistering maroon, streaked with pulsing veins of roiling black ash. Such was the unsettling reward for the destruction of the eastern hordes of the Chaos Gods. But that was only part of the host descending on Atalan. The armies of the west, fresh from victories in distant lands, now followed Archon towards the Vulture Mountain Pass. Booby traps weren't going to work this time. Vulture Mountain was the last functioning city in the world. It had to survive. Yet still chaos could hardly be kept out for long. Khazran knew this, hence his devious plan. Just what was his unspeakable scheme? All would see when the moment of final hope's fading arose.